Welcome back to the second episode of How Do Organisms Reproduce? But before we begin this episode, I would want you to recollect what we studied in the last episode. Reproduction is the production of new individuals, independent of the parent body. It is the only means of multiplication and propagation or perpetuation of a species. It is basically of two types, sexual and asexual. Asexual mode of reproduction is further divided into 6 different types: fission, budding, fragmentation, regeneration, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is further divided into 2 types, natural and artificial. In this episode, as per our promise, we're going to discuss advantages of the sexual reproduction as well as sexual reproduction in flowering plants and animals. Let us begin our journey into this arena. To begin with, if asexual mode of reproduction resulted in the formation of so many offsprings, then why sexual reproduction? So let us talk about why sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction usually results in the production of genetically identical offsprings, as the basis of asexual reproduction is mitosis. This is the division of a nucleus into 2 identical daughter nuclei. And if you remember, the only genetic variation that arises during cell division is due to the inaccuracies of DNA replication during cell division. Sexual reproduction in both flora and fauna involves basically the combination of special reproductive cells called gametes. It involves 2 parents as compared to the asexual mode of reproduction. The gametes which we talked about are of 2 types, male gametes and female gametes. Each of these gametes are produced because of a particular kind of cell division called meiosis. It is this division which results in the production of 4 cells, each of which may slightly vary from each other. In sexual reproduction, a male gamete fuses with a female gamete to form a diploid zygote. This zygote then grows and develops to form a new organism in the due course of time. So let us begin our study of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Angiosperms, or commonly called flowering plants like human beings, have male and female sex organs. These male and female sex organs are found within a flower. The function of the flower is to produce male and female gametes and to ensure their fertilization so as to produce a seed which helps in the reproduction of a plant. So let us now study the structure of a flower. There are 4 main parts of a flower: sepals, petals, stamen, and carpels. Each of these parts of a flower are placed on a broad base called receptacle. Let us discuss each one of them briefly. Coming to the first part, that is sepals. These are green leafy structures which are present in the outermost circle of a flower. All the sepals taken together are called as calyx. The function of a calyx is to protect the flower inside it when it is in its initial stage of development. The colorful part of a flower is called as petal. The petals are placed inside the sepals. These petals taken together are called as corolla. Their function is to protect the reproductive organs which are present in the center of a flower. It also helps to attract insects. A flower usually has many stamens in it. Stamen is the male reproductive organ of a plant. It consists of two parts, a long stalk called as filament and a swollen top called as anther. It is the anther which produces pollen grains. These pollen grains are also stored inside the anther. The pollen grains are usually yellow in color and appear like a powdery substance to us. It is the pollen grain which produces the two male gametes. In the center of a flower is a flask-shaped organ called carpel. Carpel is the female reproductive organ. It consists of three main parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Stigma receives the pollen grain from the stamen. It is generally sticky so that the pollen grains can stick to it. The style is a long tube which connects the stigma to the ovary. Ovary is a flask-shaped structure which consists of several ovules inside it. It not only produces them but stores many ovules inside it. Each ovule produces a female gamete. This female gamete is called as egg or ova. This is the overall structure of a flower. But the interesting point to note here is that not all flowers have the same structure. There are some flowers which have both male and female sex organs, that is the stamen and the carpels, found within the same flower. Such flowers are called as bisexual flowers. For example, hibiscus and mustard. But there are certain flowers which consist of only one of the sex organs, that is either the stamen or the carpel. Such flowers are called as unisexual flowers. For example, as seen in the case of papaya or watermelon. All this was about the structure of a flower. But how are seeds formed? A seed is formed when a male gamete fuses with that of a female gamete inside the ovule. But this takes place in two steps: pollination and fertilization. So let us begin our study of pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of a flower is called as pollination. Pollination is of two types: self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination involves transfer of the pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower, or maybe to another flower but of the same plant. Whereas cross-pollination involves transfer of the pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower present on another plant but of the same species. Bees, butterflies, insects, birds, water, wind, all of these are pollinating agents. When an insect comes and sits on a flower, the pollen grains are dusted onto the body of the insect. When this insect goes and sits on another flower, the same pollen grains are dusted onto the stigma of that flower. And in this way, pollination is brought about. The step following pollination is fertilization. Let us have a look at this step. Fertilization takes place when the male gamete fuses with that of the female gamete. But how exactly does this take place? Let us have a look. When the pollen grain falls on the stigma, it bursts after some time, and then comes out a tube called as pollen tube. These pollen tubes carry male gametes in them, which are 2 in number. As it keeps on traveling through the stigma and then into the style, it reaches the ovule. When it enters the ovule, the first male gamete fuses with that of the egg nuclei to form a diploid zygote. The second male gamete fuses with the 2 polar nuclei to form the triploid endosperm nucleus. Since fertilization takes place twice, this phenomena is called as double fertilization. Now, fertilization having taken place, there are a series of changes which take place after that event. The zygote keeps on dividing mitotically and converts itself into an embryo. The ovule develops a hard seed coat, and the ovule itself converts into a seed. The ovary grows in size and converts into a fruit. The other parts of the flower, like carpel, sepals and stamen, petals, fall off. And so now, where we earlier had a flower on the plant is a growing fruit. Tell me, children, have you ever thought that why do plants undergo this elaborate process of fertilization? This is because fertilization ultimately results in the formation of seeds first and then the fruit. Seed is the reproductive unit of the plant from which later on new plants can be developed, and fruit is that part which protects the seed. The seed consists of a baby plant called embryo and stored food inside it. That part of the seed which consists of stored food for the embryo is called as cotyledons. That part of the embryo which grows into the root is called as radicle, and that part which grows into the shoot with leaves in it is called as plumule. The embryo inside a seed remains in its dormant or inactive state. When it gets conditions of nutrition, warmth, moisture, it germinates into a new plant. And in this way, a parent plant is able to produce new plants like itself through the seed. And hence, production of seed is a phenomena which helps to perpetuate a species. Wheat grains, chana, beans, corn, etc. are all examples of seeds. Now that you've learnt about seed production and reproduction in flowering plants, children learn to appreciate every small observation in nature. Flowers are colorful and attractive to attract insects. A night flower may be white in color but is highly scented to attract insects. Fertilization as a process is highly significant for the plants because it is the only means of production of seed and then hence fruit formation, which helps in continuation of the plant. Now that we have learnt about plant reproduction, let us shift our attention to reproduction in animals. Most of the higher animals are sexually dimorphic, meaning that when we have a look at these animals morphologically, they happen to be different. Just like plants have males and female sexes in them, so do animals. An animal having a male sex cell called sperms in its body is called as a male, and an animal having female sex cells like ova or an egg in its body is called as a female. These sex cells are called as gametes. A sperm has a tail and is hundreds or thousands of times smaller than that of ova. The process of fusion of male gamete and a female gamete is called as fertilization. Fertilization is of two types, external and internal. When the fusion of male and female gamete takes place inside the female's body, it is called internal fertilization. This is usually shown by birds, mammals, reptiles. When the fusion of male gametes and the female gametes takes place outside the female's body, it is called external fertilization. It is usually shown by frogs, toads, fishes, etc. The male gamete fuses with that of the female gamete, which results in the formation of a zygote. Here, children, I would want you to understand very clearly one thing. The cells of a body consist of particular set of chromosomes. For example, a human cell consists of 23 pairs of 46 chromosomes in it. So when we say that a male gamete fuses with that of a female gamete, does it result in multiplication of the chromosome number or the DNA content in it? No, it doesn't. So how is it that the DNA content and the chromosome number of a species is maintained constant? The gametes are special reproductive cells which consist of half the chromosome number as that of the other cells of the body, called as somatic cells. And these gametes are produced by a special kind of cell division called as meiosis. Meiosis reduces the chromosome number and the DNA content to half. For example, in case of human beings, a male gamete called the sperm consists of 23 chromosomes, and a female gamete called ova consists of 23 chromosomes. So when a sperm fuses with that of ova, it consists of 23 plus 23 chromosomes, which is equal to 46 chromosomes inside a zygote. All multicellular organisms begin their life from the single cell structure called zygote. The zygote grows and develops into an embryo, the embryo into a fetus, and the fetus finally comes out as a young one. The time period from the growth and development of the zygote till the birth of the young one is called as the gestation period. Having introduced the topic of sexual reproduction in animals, I would want your children to learn